The hospital room on the 32nd floor was brighter than most people's homes, yet it felt unbearably dark. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering skyline of New York City, a view worth millions, but no one in the room noticed it. All eyes were fixed on the tiny body lying inside the glass incubator. The baby was impossibly small, his chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. Tubes and wires surrounded him like a fragile web, each machine humming softly, blinking with lights that measured life in cold numbers. Every beep echoed through the room, marking time in a way that felt cruel and final. Around the incubator stood the best doctors money could buy. These were names known across the world, specialists flown in from Boston, California, even overseas. Men and women who had saved presidents, celebrities, and royalty. Their white coats were crisp, their faces trained to hide emotion. Yet today, their eyes avoided one another. Clipboards were lowered. Shoulders sagged. Silence filled the space between them, heavy and unforgiving. At the far end of the room stood the baby's father. He was a billionaire, a man whose signature could move markets and whose phone calls could change lives. He had built empires from nothing, survived boardroom battles, and never once accepted defeat. He had donated millions to hospitals like this one, his name engraved on walls and wings. For the first time in his life, none of it mattered. He stood motionless, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. His expensive suit looked out of place here, wrinkled from sleepless nights spent pacing hospital corridors. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He had not slept in days, not since his son's condition worsened. "Try again," he whispered, his voice cracking. "There has to be something else. Another treatment. Another procedure. I'll pay whatever it costs." The lead doctor stepped forward slowly, choosing each word with painful care. He had delivered miracles before, but not today. "We've exhausted every option," the doctor said gently. "Every test, every intervention. His condition isn't responding." The billionaire's breath caught. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't. He had always believed there was a solution for everything. More money. Better technology. Stronger influence. But this time, the doctor lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry," he continued. "We've done all we can." The room fell completely still. The billionaire turned toward the incubator, staring at his son's tiny hand curled into a fist, fighting a battle no newborn should ever face. Tears streamed down his face, unashamed, unstoppable. For the first time, he understood a truth no amount of wealth could protect him from. Power could build skyscrapers. Money could buy time. But neither could save a life on their own. And in that silence, where hope seemed to fade, fate was quietly preparing to intervene. Just outside the hospital's revolving doors, where the shine of polished marble gave way to scuffed concrete, sat a girl most people passed without a second glance. Her name was Maya. She was 14 years old, small for her age, with worn sneakers and a faded hoodie pulled tight against the evening cold. A frayed backpack rested at her feet, holding everything she needed for long days that started before sunrise and ended long after dark. Maya wasn't visiting anyone. She worked here. Every afternoon after school, she changed into scrubs in a tiny staff restroom and pushed a cleaning cart through endless hallways. She wiped fingerprints off glass walls, emptied trash bins, and mopped floors that reflected wealth and urgency. She had learned to stay invisible. Move quietly, keep her head down, don't slow anyone important. In a building full of powerful people, Maya had mastered the art of not being seen. That evening, she sat on the steps because her shift had ended early. A nurse had gently told her she could go home, there was nothing else to clean. The words echoed strangely in her mind. Nothing else to clean. Nothing else to fix. As Maya hugged her knees, she watched ambulances come and go, their lights flashing like distant warnings. She thought about her grandmother at home, rubbing arthritis from her hands after long hours at work. She thought about the rent notice taped to their refrigerator. And then, without meaning to, she overheard two nurses talking as they stepped outside for air. "Did you see the baby in the private ICU?" one whispered. "The billionaire's son," the other replied. "Yeah, it's not looking good. Maya's heart tightened. She didn't know the billionaire. She didn't know anything about luxury hospital rooms or private doctors. But she knew babies. She knew how fragile life could be. Her thoughts drifted to her little brother, Isaiah, who had been full of laughter and energy until one sudden illness took him away. She remembered the helplessness in her mother's eyes, the way doctors spoke in careful tones, the way hope slipped through their fingers. Her chest ached as the nurses continued talking, their voices low and heavy. "They've tried everything," one said. Sometimes even money can't help." That sentence struck Maya harder than anything else. She stood up slowly, her legs trembling, not from fear, but from a strange pull she couldn't explain. Something inside her stirred, a quiet but powerful voice reminding her of stories her grandmother used to tell. Stories about their family. About blood. About survival. About helping others when no one else could. Maya pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart race. She was just a poor black girl who cleaned floors. No one asked for her opinion. No one ever noticed her. But as she looked back at the towering hospital doors, she knew something deep in her soul. Walking away would haunt her forever. So Maya took a breath, squared her shoulders. Maya's footsteps echoed softly as she walked down the private ICU hallway, a place she had never dared to enter before. The air felt heavier here, charged with urgency and quiet despair. She clutched the straps of her backpack, her palms damp with sweat. Every instinct told her she didn't belong, but something stronger pushed her forward. Outside the glass doors of the room, she hesitated. Through the window, she saw the billionaire standing frozen beside the incubator, his face hollow with exhaustion. Doctors spoke in hushed tones, their expressions grim. Maya swallowed hard. This was real. This wasn't a story her grandmother told or a memory from the past. Lives were hanging in the balance. She knocked. The sound was so soft it almost went unnoticed. A nurse turned, startled, clearly annoyed. "This area is restricted," she said sharply. I work here," Maya replied, her voice trembling but steady enough. "I just need 1 minute." The nurse frowned, ready to dismiss her, but before she could speak, the billionaire looked up. His eyes, red and swollen, met Maya's. There was nothing left in them to lose. "Let her speak," he said quietly. The room seemed to hold its breath. Maya stepped inside, feeling the weight of every gaze. The doctors looked confused, even irritated. A child. A cleaner. Someone who clearly didn't belong in a room filled with power and authority. "I don't have money," Maya began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I don't look important. But I think I can help your baby." A murmur rippled through the room. One doctor scoffed. Another shook his head. "This is highly inappropriate," the lead physician said firmly. "We can't." "Please," Maya interrupted, surprising even herself. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "Just listen. My grandma always said our family blood is different. Rare. Doctors told her it saved lives once, a long time ago." I heard the nurses talking, and I remembered. The billionaire stared at her, torn between disbelief and desperation. "Are you saying you're a match?" he asked. Maya nodded slowly. "I don't know for sure. But I help donate blood whenever I can. They always say it's unusual. Strong." The doctors exchanged glances, frustration mixing with curiosity. "This isn't how medicine works," one said. "We've run all necessary tests." "Maybe not all of them," Maya replied softly. "Sometimes you don't look where you don't expect answers." Silence fell again, thicker than before. The billionaire walked closer to Maya, lowering himself to her eye level. "If you're wrong," he said gently, "nothing changes. But if you're right." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Then a baby gets to live." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the lead doctor exhaled deeply. "We'll run the test," he said at last. "One more." Maya closed her eyes, her hands shaking not from fear, but from hope. She had done the unthinkable. She had spoken when no one expected her to. And in that moment, something shifted. Sometimes, the bravest act isn't having power, it's daring to believe you matter, and stepped back inside toward a room where hope had nearly disappeared, and where her presence would change everything. The hours that followed moved with agonizing slowness, as if time itself were uncertain about what would happen next. Maya sat in a small chair near the wall, her feet dangling above the floor, hands folded tightly in her lap. A nurse had given her a blanket, but it did little to stop the shiver running through her body. The room smelled of antiseptic and quiet hope. Behind the glass, doctors moved with renewed urgency. Blood samples were drawn. Screens lit up with fresh data. Voices that had once been resigned now carried a cautious edge of possibility. No one spoke to Maya, yet everyone seemed aware of her presence, as if the air itself had changed since she arrived. The billionaire stood by the incubator, his gaze shifting between his son and the girl who had dared to step forward. He studied her carefully now, the scuffed shoes, the worn backpack, the calm strength behind her nervous eyes. This child had walked into his world with nothing, yet somehow carried more hope than all the wealth he had summoned. A doctor approached him quietly. "The preliminary results are unusual," he said. "Her blood has properties we don't see often. It may stabilize the baby long enough for his body to respond." The billionaire's chest tightened. "May," he whispered. The doctor nodded. "There are no guarantees. But there is a chance." That was enough. Maya was gently guided into a nearby room. As the nurse prepared her, Maya's hands trembled. Fear crept in, not for herself, but for the tiny life depending on her. She closed her eyes and remembered her grandmother's words, "Do what you can. The rest is faith." When the procedure began, the room grew quiet again, this time filled not with defeat, but anticipation. Doctors watched monitors intently. The billionaire clasped his hands together, whispering prayers he hadn't spoken in years. Then, slowly, something changed. The baby's oxygen levels steadied. His heart rate, once erratic, found a rhythm. One by one, alarms softened. A nurse leaned closer to the monitor, her eyes widening. "Doctor," she said, her voice shaking, "you need to see this." The lead physician stepped forward, disbelief washing over his face. "He's responding," he said softly. "He's stabilizing." For a moment, no one moved. Then a sound broke through the silence, a weak, fragile cry. It wasn't loud. It wasn't strong. But it was life. The billionaire collapsed into the nearest chair, covering his face as tears poured through his fingers. Years of control, pride, and certainty shattered in that instant. He wasn't a billionaire anymore. He was just a father. Grateful, humbled, and overwhelmed. Maya watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her own face. Her hands still shook, but her heart felt full in a way she had never known. Doctors stood in stunned silence. Science had done its part, but compassion had opened the door. A miracle had arrived, not in the form of wealth or power, but through the courage of a girl who refused to stay invisible. Morning light spilled gently through the hospital windows, washing the room in a soft golden glow. The machines still hummed, but their rhythm was calm now, steady, reassuring. The baby slept peacefully, his tiny fingers curling and uncurling as if he were finally free to dream. Life, once hanging by a thread, had chosen to stay. Maya stood near the window, her backpack at her feet, unsure of what came next. She felt smaller now that the crisis had passed, almost embarrassed by the attention she was receiving. Doctors passed by, some offering quiet smiles, others nodding with deep respect. They would remember this night for the rest of their lives. The billionaire approached her slowly. Gone was the sharp edge in his posture, the commanding presence that had bent rooms to his will. He looked like a man who had been changed. He stopped in front of Maya and knelt so they were eye to eye. "You saved my son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my entire world." Maya shook her head gently. "I just did what anyone should do." He reached into his pocket and placed a card in her hand. "This is my personal number," he said. "I can pay for your education. Your family's home. Anything you want. Just say it." Maya looked at the card, then slowly closed his fingers around it and pushed his hand back toward him. "Please," she said softly, "use it to help others instead. Families who don't have anyone listening to them. Kids like me." The words hit him harder than any loss he had ever known. Tears welled in his eyes again as he nodded. "I promise." True to his word, the promise didn't fade with time. Within weeks, the billionaire established a foundation in Maya's name, one that funded medical research, free testing for rare conditions, and healthcare access for underserved communities across America. Hospital policies changed. Voices once ignored were finally heard. Maya returned to school, but her life was different now, not because of money, but because she had learned her worth. She continued volunteering, continued listening, continued caring. And every time she doubted herself, she remembered the night she chose courage over fear. Years later, the baby, now a healthy, laughing child, would ask about the girl who saved him. His father would tell him a simple truth. Never measure people by what they have. Measure them by what they give. And somewhere in that story lived a message for the world. The richest hearts often belong to those with the least. And sometimes, one act of kindness is powerful enough to change everything.